tons and tons of basketball yet to be dished out, including the state championship games, all happening this Saturday at Gainbridge Fieldhouse in Indianapolis. Cal Neddenriep, the king of high school coverage, is here. A busy day to be had by you for certain, but it's going to be a busy day at Gainbridge. Man, it's going to be a lot of people to get in and out, first of all. So I feel sorry for the ushers that we will be working there that day. Flory Badunga named Gatorade Player of the Year. Will he win Mr. Basketball? Probably most likely, but no one knows better than that than Kyle. Kyle, what say ye?
I mean, I think he's probably the front runner. I will say I think Jack Benner is going to get quite a bit of support, and he's the one. He's still playing, so Flory's not. Obviously, they got beat by Fishers in the regional round at Newcastle, and Benner will play in the 2A state championship on Saturday against Wapahani. So, I do think the way these votes go, sometimes I think Benner will get a lot of support from his part of the state, from probably from a lot of the schools that play against him, and probably a lot of 2A coaches and media who cover that class a lot. So I do think he'll get quite a bit of support. And, you go and play a big game on Saturday and play well and win a state title. I think that could help him. But I think with everything what Flory's done, making state last year, winning as much as he did, putting up the numbers he did over his career. He didn't score as many points as Benner, but, about every other area, he was really dominant. And he did score a lot too. He just didn't have as much as Benner. But, so I don't know. I mean, I don't think there's any one. Yeah, I kind of like the way the ballot just says, like, I forget exactly. It basically just asks who you pick for Mr. Basketball. There's no stipulation on what you're choosing exactly. You just kind of pick what matters to you. And, so I think he'll get a lot of support. But Flory probably had a head start going into the season, and I think he definitely didn't do anything this year to hurt himself. And winning, I did a story last week on, winning Gatorade and, winning Mr. Basketball. Is there some correlate? There's definitely a lot of crossover there. It doesn't correlate, to anything necessarily. It's a different voting mechanism and system and whatever. But, you do see that happen a lot of times where players double up winning that and Mr. Basketball.
And you also see, I can't remember who did it last, but you will also find juniors sometimes that can win them. They're allowed, or they're eligible to win the Gatorade Player of the Year. So you can junior win that title in front of a potential Mr. Basketball in his state. I don't recall the last time that happened. I know you would know that.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think 5 times players have won back-to-back Gatorade Players of the Year. And, most of the time, if you win as a junior, you win as a senior. It's not every time, though. Trey Kaufman, Wren won as a junior and then didn't win as a senior. And Caleb First actually won Mr. Basketball. So, not every time that happens. But, yeah, I mean, most of the time, you win as a junior. Normally, if you stay around, you're going to win as a senior. And that's what happened in this case. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't, it doesn't always, it's just different voting. I think Mr. Basketball, it's a good vote. I mean, they get a lot of votes back, which is good. I did note it did seem like the system changed a little bit this year, which I don't know if that's good or bad, but just from looking at the website, it looked like it was a little bit maybe harder to find it or whatever. But so I just, you want to make it as easy as possible for people to vote, and hopefully that continues to be the case. But yeah, I think Flory's probably the pick. I don't, again, Benner, I think will get support. Whether that's enough or he does enough this weekend, I guess we'll find out.
And a recent piece of yours, I'm going to actually use the question that you said is a question that gets asked often. How does Fishers, after losing one of the top players in the country to a prep school, La Lumiere, improve enough to become and stay the top-ranked team in the state all year? And that's a great question, because that's hard to do, especially when you lose someone as good as Jalen Harrelson.
Yeah, it doesn't really make sense, because obviously Harrelson, very unselfish player. He had the ball in his hands a lot, but he also was, a really good passer. He's almost a better passer probably than a shooter to some extent. But he played a good team. So the biggest thing to me is not necessarily anything Jalen did or didn't do, but just that the other players who came back have just gotten a lot better. Keenan Garner, who is now a Division I prospect, he came over from Germany. He was living on a military base with his family. His dad got a job. Never even really knew much about Indiana. Came here and became a really good player for Fishers last year, even too. And then this year he's taken a big step, and I am almost positive he'll be an Indiana All-Star. But then you've had other players kind of just get better. Player development, I think, is a big thing with them, and I think that's probably the number one reason you could look at. The second thing is that they've had two freshmen come in who have been better, I think, than even people realized they would be. We didn't know how Cooper Zachary and Jason Gardner would do as freshmen. Knew they were good players, but would they be ready for that type of jump into varsity basketball? And both of them have been really consistently good all year. And I think the one advantage Fishers has over almost anyone else that they've played this year is that they put 5 guys on the floor who can all score in different ways. Not every team has that. Not every team. Normally you can look at a high school team and say, stop this guy. There's number 1, number 2, number 3, and then maybe the 4 and 5 guys you're kind of leaving open or not worried about them so much on offense. Fishers, you can't do that, and that's been. They've had games where like Keenan Garner may not have a great shooting game or may not score much. Cooper Zachary, the freshman, may not have a great shooting game, but they can go to other people who kind of, every game but one, the Carmel game during the season, they've been able to figure it out and find a way to win. And I thought it was pretty indicative in the Noblesville game where, it ends up the ball's in Jason Gardner's hands and he passes it to Parker Purdue, who makes the game-winning shot. Well, Parker Purdue is 9th on the team in scoring and scored 4 points that game, but he makes the game-winning shot. And that's kind of the nature of their team. It's just there's 10 guys, 10, 11 guys who can kind of all do their job. They can all score in different ways, and that's what's made them so good. They're just very balanced, and I think that's kind of, there might be teams that have better star players, but not many teams that can go this deep and be able to score in so many different ways.
And we're going to have a game in which two teams have already played a 13-point win by Fishers, but that was a long time ago at the start of the season. Both teams are much better now, as usually all teams are, but I think this is expected to be a much closer game than that early season one.
Well, and you almost throw it out the window completely because Mark Zachary didn't even play in that game. Mark Zachary was getting ready to play in the football state championship that week. So, their best player or second best player, depending on, KJ Wyndham, 1A, 1B. But Mark, obviously he's their point guard. He makes them go. He was getting ready to play state football that weekend, and he was at the game, and he was trying to help in the huddles and whatnot, but he didn't play. So it's almost like, it's not a non-entity completely. I mean, I know Fishers went back and Ben Davis went back and looked at that game, and, just what can you glean from, from playing each other that early. But yeah, I mean, it's almost a nothing because of that reason. And Mark is he was in kind of football shape to start the season. He's gotten a lot better and played phenomenal in the semi-state wins for Ben Davis. He's become that lead point guard that they really needed this year. So, but yeah, it's just and Ben Davis is not, they're not the Ben Davis of last year as far as talent and depth and height and everything, but they do have that championship pedigree, that defending champ sort of thing to them. It's hard to it's hard to quantify exactly what that is, but they definitely have it. And I think that carried them through in the semi-state against a very good Jeffersonville team that gave them everything possible. And Jeffersonville could easily be playing this weekend. That's a really, really good team that was playing phenomenal at the end of the season. Beat a really good Lawrence North team, came back, and then nearly took out Ben Davis, if not for a late comeback there. So, they're tested. They're definitely tested, and they haven't always been great this year. And then but the second half of the season they've played much better. So, very good team. I mean, I wouldn't, I think Fishers is the favorite, but I think it'll be a really good game. I think it will be a lot of fun. Ben Davis likes this type of big game atmosphere, and I think they're going to play well Saturday night.
Yeah, and we could be talking about Jeffersonville this time next year because they've got most of the core of their team back. So look forward to that. 3A game, what are your expectations for that?
Well, yeah, I think it'll be, Scottsburg is probably wanting to play a little bit more zone you, play a little bit more of a slower style, I would say, than South Bend St. Joe. Chase Kneezy is the star player for South Bend St. Joe. If you remember, his brother JR played there a few years ago, is now at Notre Dame, was an Indiana All-Star. I think that was 2021. But Chase is a junior, really good player. I'm looking forward to see him play in person on Saturday night. And then, and they're more of an athletic, team that wants to get up and down. Scottsburg, I think, can do that too, but they're going to play probably more 1-3-1 and use their length. They're a long team. Wyatt Zellers, he's a nephew and a son of the Westmorelands, the girls who played, if you remember, the Scottsburg, the 1989 girls state championship team from Scottsburg. He was basically a son of one of the Carla, who played on that team, and then Renee, who was Miss Basketball that year. So it's kind of a cool lineage with that Scottsburg team. But Cody Clancy, really good player for them, a senior. Jack Miller, so they have different guys who can score for them, and multiple 1,000-point scorers on that team. So kind of a unique team that way. And also the crowd will be interesting. I think Scottsburg is going to bring a ton of people. I would assume that they really support their basketball. So you wonder how that kind of plays into it too, and you also wonder a little bit about this 2-week break, how that it's just such a long time to be off, And I thought, a couple of years ago, I guess that was the 21 season. It was, I thought the games were a little bit ragged because they did have the extra week that year because NCAA came because of COVID. All the tournament was here, and I just thought it was kind of a little bit rough. So hopefully that's not the case. But that was also a year where, the fans were a little limited. And so I think it felt like a bigger arena than it'll feel Saturday. I think back to some normalcy will help, and, rather than it was in 2021. So I think it'll be, Scottsburg, St. Joe. I think that'll be a good game. I think, both those night games will be good. The 2A game too should be excellent with Brownstown Central and Wapahani, which both those communities really support their programs.